In the final days of October 1875, a company of 121 lumbermen crossed into the Black Pines of northern Maine. They were never supposed to be remembered. For nearly a century, their story was buried beneath corporate ledgers, church donations, and a single unmarked graveyard fenced with iron and moss. When the snow thawed that next spring, only 9 men walked out, half mad, hollow-eyed, and reeking of pine tar and blood. Locals would later say the forest wasn't haunted, it was hungry. Their camp, Black Vein Logging Company, District No. 5, was meant to cut the last remaining section of timber untouched by man. But the land they entered, beyond Aroostook's northern boundary, where maps bled into white, wasn't theirs to take, and the deeper they went, the more the woods began to breathe back. Silas Rourke was the foreman, a devout man of 42 who believed in labor more than prayer. His ledgers, recovered in 1931 from an abandoned lockbox, document the descent like scripture. Each page begins orderly: wages, food shipments, rations, timber yields, but by November 2nd, the handwriting begins to shake. Entries turn from clean numbers to frantic observations, men hearing voices under the soil, timber bleeds when cut. They found eyes in the sap. Rourke's handwriting ends abruptly mid-sentence on November 12th, the ink smeared as if written during trembling. His final line, "The forest remembers the bargain." What bargain he meant was never known, until much later, when fragments of old French missionary records surfaced, describing a covenant of the timberline, a pact made centuries earlier to seal something beneath the roots. The men built their camp on Old St. Huron Ridge, a burial site of the Passamaquoddy, though few knew. When the company's surveyor found the ridge filled with shallow mounds, he ordered them leveled for cabin space. By the 5th day, 3 men were missing, no tracks, no signs of struggle, just their tools, neatly laid in a circle near the stump line. At night, the remaining loggers reported the knocking, a rhythmic pounding that echoed from beneath their floorboards. Some claimed it was the sound of roots expanding. Others said it was a heartbeat. The camp priest, Father Emmett Boyle, told them not to speak of it, not to name what they heard. But by week's end, even he stopped saying Mass. Because the sound had begun to repeat his own prayers back to him, winter arrived early. The first snow came blood, colored with sap. In the early morning fog, men began finding effigies, twisted from bark and moss, hung from pine branches with sinew. Each was faceless, save for a symbol carved into the chest, a crude eye within a circle, identical to one later found in Rourke's ledger margin. The cookhouse burned on November 8th. Witnesses said the fire started inside the pot itself, as if something beneath the stew ignited from within. By now, morale had collapsed. Men muttered about an unspoken debt between the company and the church that sponsored the expedition. That night, a message was carved into the logging cart outside Rourke's quarters: "Take what you gave." When rescuers found the surviving 9 men months later, they were scattered across 20 miles of frost-bitten woodland. They had torn out their own tongues. Each carried the same handmade talisman, woven twigs bound with hair and teeth. When questioned by state officials, none spoke. One of them, identified as Jonas Kell, age 19, died during transport to Augusta Asylum. His final words were written in charcoal on his cell wall: "We saw what the forest kept. It keeps us now." After their deaths, their remains were cremated without ceremony. The ashes were stored in unmarked urns, buried by the Maine Historical Society under sealed court order in 1893. Black Vein Logging Company had been financed not by industry, but by the Diocese of Portland. Documents show the bishop himself ordered timber drawn from the cursed tract for use in St. Agatha's orphanage, built the following spring. But St. Agatha's would later gain its own reputation. Doors closing by themselves, children vanishing, nuns whispering that the walls sweat sap at night. When one of the original orphans, now an adult in 1902, was interviewed, she said the wood of the floors remembered footsteps that weren't ours. In 1876, a single train car arrived in Bangor marked Black Vein Timber. Its manifest listed 43 tons of pine logs, but the destination entry was crossed out. Railway workers swore the cargo smelled of iron and decay. When they opened one log for inspection, a human molar was found inside the core. Within a week, the manifest vanished from company records. The man who signed it, Derek Halcombe, was found drowned in his bathtub, his fingernails packed with splinters. In 1921, a 12-year-old boy from Millinocket named Edgar Trout unearthed a strange parchment from his grandfather's attic, a hand-drawn map of the 1875 camp with a note: "The debt remains unpaid. The forest will call again." Weeks later, Trout disappeared while playing near the tree line. All that was found was his left shoe and a small circle carved into the bark beside it, the same emblem from Rourke's ledger. Locals sealed the area, naming it the Quiet Line. No one crossed it again until 1948. A post-war development company, Haven and Price Timber Works, purchased the land for new lumber production. On their third day of excavation, the ground split under their bulldozers, revealing dozens of skeletal hands rising from the soil, as though the earth itself had exhaled them. The foreman ordered the pit sealed and reported no anomalies. Within a month, the company folded. Every surviving worker from that site later reported hearing the knocking, again, in their sleep. In 1953, a retired logger named Henry Collies, claiming to be the illegitimate son of one of the 9 survivors, recorded a confession on wax cylinder. His voice trembles. "They didn't go in there for timber. They went to seal it back. The church promised blood for silence. My father said the trees had faces when they burned." The recording ends with a low thud, measured, steady, echoing 3 times, like something knocking from beneath the floor. Old French colonial writings found in 1964 described missionaries encountering spirits of the green veins who demanded sacrifices for safe passage through the forest. They sealed their covenant by burying relics, iron crosses, and bound tongues beneath sacred roots. The covenant warned that should the wood be taken, the breath of the buried shall rise through the sap. The Black Vein name wasn't about the trees. It referred to something alive beneath them, arteries in the soil. By 1911, St. Agatha's orphanage, built from the cursed timber, was closed after a series of child deaths. Witnesses said the wooden floorboards would pulse like living skin when storms passed overhead. When demolition crews arrived in 1933, they refused to enter. The walls wept resin. In the center of the chapel stood an untouched confessional, its interior coated in fine black ash. They burned the orphanage to the ground. But 3 weeks later, the same confessional was found reassembled in a church miles away, without anyone admitting to moving it. Every recurrence of the event mirrors the number 9, 9 survivors, 9 unmarked urns. 9 orphans found dead in St. Agatha's cellar. 9 knocks heard on every recording tied to the forest. Scholars later connected it to an ancient symbol of recursion, a cycle that feeds on completion, on returning what was taken. One theologian described it simply: 9 is the mouth that devours its own echo. In 1978, a small film crew from Boston attempted to document the legend of the Black Vein Camp. Their footage was confiscated by state authorities before airing. All that remains is an audio fragment, the cameraman whispering, "There's light beneath the trees, it's moving." The official reason for suppression: public disturbance of historical records. Unofficially, one of the archivists died after the seizure. He had swallowed pine needles until his throat closed. In 1982, a sample of preserved wood from the original camp was tested by biochemist Dr. Louis Merrow. The sap tested positive for human hemoglobin. Within months, Merrow disappeared. His laboratory was burned. The remaining samples turned black, their jars cracking from internal pressure, as if something alive was trying to escape. A single letter, preserved in the Vatican's sealed archives and leaked in 1991, was written by Father Emmett Boyle, the camp priest who vanished in 1875. The letter reads, "We thought we were servants of God, but it was not God that answered the prayer. It lives in the timber, in the roots, in us. Tell them the forest doesn't forgive at harvests." Satellite images of northern Maine show a strange dark patch in the Aroostook woodlands, thicker, older, resistant to logging. When viewed in thermal imaging, it emits a faint rhythmic pulse. No animal sounds are detected within its perimeter. No wind touches its canopy. But sometimes the microphones catch a low, percussive knocking, always 9 beats. The government lists the area as protected wetland. Locals call it the Vein. In 2021, a hiker live-streamed from deep within Aroostook's restricted zone, claiming to have found remnants of the camp. At minute 9:13 of the footage, he stops, whispering that the trees are bleeding. His camera pans down. The roots are moving, pulsing like veins. He begins reciting something under his breath, words not English, not human. Then a single hand, gray and bark-like, presses out of the ground beside him. The stream ends abruptly. His account was deleted, his name never reported. In 2023, restorers at a small church in Vermont discovered that their altar, made of reclaimed 19th-century timber, contained embedded carvings identical to the Black Vein symbol. During renovation, one of the workers vanished. His blood was later found seeping through the wood grain beneath the altar, absorbed rather than spilled. A week later, parishioners reported hearing a steady knocking during service, 9 times, like a heart beneath the floor. Every forest has a memory. Every cut, every wound is a name it doesn't forget. The 121 men who entered Aroostook in 1008, 175 weren't lost. They were collected, and their debt, made in wood and blood, continues to harvest what remains of us. They say the trees whisper at night when the wind is still, but if you listen closely, it isn't the wind, it's the forest counting 121.